Welcome to an Instagram Live. This is the Behind the Story time. I'm Naomi and I co-host Behind the Story. It's an author interview show. We record new content twice a month. And our latest guest was Barbara M Britton, who writes biblical fiction or historical fiction set in Bible times. And if you followed me for a while, then you know that that's my genre as well. And this is Defending David, and it is a Old Testament, and it follows the story of Ittai the Gittite. Let me just get you up here, secure. There we go. I don't know. I think it was user error, but I tried to hop on and give a little congratulations because this book just released like a week ago and I didn't see anyone watching live, and then, which is fine, you know, it is what it is, but then I went to save it and either I glitched or my phone did because it's gone. So congratulations, Barb. If you didn't see that one, yeah, it was exciting to be on your launch team and to interview you with Behind the Story. So now it's time for Defending David and story time. The tag is, can an orphaned woman and a Philistine exile defend an aging king who cannot control a rebellious son? It's an excellent book. You can find the real life Ittai in 2 Samuel, like 15 through 19. Actually, I have it right here. Yeah, 15 through 19 is what this book covers. It covers Absalom's rebellion, and when he was trying to overthrow his father, and like David left the city of Jerusalem, and Absalom had the unfortunate demise where his hair caught up in the tree, and then he was killed. But anyway, so this puts such an interesting spin on Ittai and David and Absalom and their relationship. So it was really well done. So anyway, oh, another thing I think I mentioned on my Disappeared Live was that Ittai actually is the name of my character from On Desolate Heights, which is my novella. And, you know, when you're writing biblical fiction, you don't want it to be hard to read. Like, obviously you're not speaking out loud, but some of the Bible names can be kind of tricky. So we'll commonly go through genealogies and different random places that you never expect to see and steal those names. At least I do. And so I found Ittai and I liked it, and now suddenly here's an actual story on the actual Ittai. So, but it's pretty cool to share. It's a good hero to share a name with. So without further ado, it is story time for Behind the Story. And I think I'm going to go to... so prologue is actually about 20, 30 years earlier when before David is king, and he is in the Philistine territory, if you're familiar with that. And he is, so that's where Barbara Britton has Ittai meeting King David, because Ittai is a Philistine. So it's pretty cool on that. So I'm going to skip over prologue. That's where the fictionalized meeting of David and Ittai is, when Ittai is a boy. And so then I'm going to start right in chapter 1, 30 years later. Beersheba, south of Hebron in the land of Judah. Ramona clutched the tunic of her elderly neighbor and nearly ripped the embroidered cloth. Let me stay with you, Leah. I will gut fish, bring you water, anything you see fit for me to do. You know I cannot take you into my household when you have kin. Her friend's voice quivered, but she did not remove Ramona's fingers from her garment. Welcoming the old woman's calloused hand caress, Ramona leaned against the small stone home she had shared with her mother for 24 years before her mother had passed away. Ramona cradled her confidant's hand close. And why didn't my uncle come to mourn his sister? He could have claimed me after her burial. Ramona's lungs became as tiny as an unopened bud. 30 days was not long enough to mourn a mother, or mourn the loss of a life she knew. I would beg you to stay if there was no other, Leah whispered. Your mother's brother will welcome you to Jerusalem. Think about your life in the palace. You will not have to work so hard every day. Leah's eyes grew wide, but they held no hint of glee. She shook her head. Be brave. It is not safe for you here without a protector. The elders have arranged an escort for you. Jerusalem is only a few days' ride. Leah stepped away from the wall and pulled gently on Ramona's arms. Come along now. What choice did an unmarried orphan have? Shuffling her sandals, Ramona followed her neighbor away from the familiarity of her home and into the trampled dirt road. Jerusalem may be only a few days' ride, but the ride was one Leah, a widow, could hardly manage at her age. This was another burial, a farewell to a woman who had become like a beloved aunt. Tears welled in Ramona's eyes. Leah leaned closer. Your escort awaits. If he keeps pacing, he will dig a ravine with his feet. Eglon is always impatient. Ramona swept her grief from her face. I hope the collection of coins bestowed by the elders was sufficient, or he will complain at every hoofbeat. Why couldn't she have a kinsman closer in blood than Eglon? Do not mind him. You are going to the king's palace. Your mother would be pleased to see you in the city of David. Leah rested her head against Ramona's shoulder. The scent of wisdom and wildflowers comforted Ramona's angst. Seek out a scribe or a nobleman to wed while you are there. I am too weary to seek out a man. A quiet room with food that I do not have to roast would be a blessing. Ramona relished the warmth and bony stature of the woman who had loved her since she was born. She avoided the scowl of the escort who balked at her tardiness. Hurry, woman, you're wasting daylight. Eglon whistled, spooking Ramona's donkey tethered to an acacia tree. Ramona dutifully bobbed her head, making sure her curls did not spring forth from underneath her head covering. As the day grew warmer, her ringlets would grow tighter. The road should offer us some speed. A 3-day ride with Eglon was punishment fitting a criminal. But Eglon had sailed with her father when she had a father, so she withheld her complaints. Leah embraced her and gave a forceful kiss. Remember me, but only until you find another home and a husband. How could she let go of this woman whom she knew in her heart she would never in her life lay eyes on again? She prayed as the soft yet withered feel of Leah's lips would never fade from her memory. Please let me celebrate one more Sabbath here. Her request was wispy and barely spoken aloud, but it reached Leah's ears. Leah's chest shook. I hope there is an opening in the palace courts for you. You never tire of arguing. Covering her face with her veil, Leah said, Go now, sing to God in the flatlands. I will pray a blessing on your journey. As Leah rushed toward her dwelling, Ramona ambled toward her mount. She wouldn't look back. She wouldn't glance at the stone threshold where her mother's image would always remain. She had her memories tucked away deep in her heart, and those pieces of her past would travel with her to Jerusalem. At a full stomp and coming face to face with her, Eglon muttered, Get on the mount. Murderers wait in the dark. You are not worthy of my life. He grasped her arm, pinching her flesh. No scream fled from her lips. She met his narrow-eyed scowl. Release me. I am your kin and a recent orphan. Didn't you receive payment from the elders? Her voice rose in defiance of his touch. Eglon released his hold with one last twist to her skin. She would not give him the satisfaction of a flinch. When she was reunited with her uncle, she would recount Eglon's insults and serenade anyone who cared to listen. After her confession, Eglon had better flee from the city of David, or he would spend the night in prison. Some privilege had to come with being the niece of a royal official, even if her uncle had shut himself in the palace and forgotten his family. Before mounting her donkey, she rubbed the leather satchel covering its haunches. The satchel held her mother's striped veil and a single golden earring embedded with 3 emeralds. Her father had brought the gems from one of his voyages. Over the years, 1 earring had been lost. Ramona treasured the bold green stones, a series of 3 jewels, one for the mother, a father, and a daughter, an only daughter. With every clap of her donkey's hooves, she bid farewell to Beersheba. Her heart couldn't bear glimpsing her home one last time. Ghosts lived there now, memories of loved ones buried in the hills. She scanned the road ahead of her small caravan. Her new life loomed before her. Traveling with Eglon had one benefit. The man wasted few words on her. She and her escort plodded north toward Jerusalem. The northern route through the mountains bustled with the lines of camels and merchants who were intent on selling goods and bedding down at towns along the way. Under the midday heat, her veil soaked and weighed heavy upon her curls. When moisture trickled down her face, it seemed each ringlet of hair grew tighter like a possessed vine. Later, as the sun began to set, no village came into view. Halting his mount, Eglon pointed at some caves located west of the next incline. "We will camp in the crags for the night." "Would it not be safer to sleep within city walls?" Ramona glanced at the foreign landscape. Burlap brown hills, no waves of water, no gulls squawking overhead. Her nostrils itched from the day's dust. "An inn will cost me, and elders were not as generous as you seem to believe." "Surely the innkeeper would be respectful of my uncle's position at the palace." Any mundane chore she would be called upon to perform for a wage would be preferable to resting out in the open with Eglon. "We are a fair distance from Hebron. What is 1 night for a fisherman's daughter? Pretend you are on a boat." "Throwing you overboard? How did her father ever work alongside this fool?" She dismounted and gave her donkey a drink from the half-empty water skin. No doubt the animal thirsted from her escort's stingy stops. Movement on the trail caught her attention. Eglon turned from atop his donkey. A stranger approached. He trotted his mount closer. From where had the man come? Most people found shelter when the shadows of darkness dimmed their route. No caravan followed this lone traveler. She did not remember passing him earlier in the day. The stranger nodded to Eglon. "Where are you headed?" "Jerusalem, but we will camp for the night." Eglon indicated the covered caves. "Ahead. Perhaps we could join together. I've had a long trip from Lachish." Lachish? Sweat did not stain this man's tunic. If he had come this far east, he should glow like an ember. Eglon kicked his mount and trotted forward. "Come along if you like." "No." Her refusal rose toward the vanishing sunset. She sprinted to catch up with her escort and blocked his path. "We have not been properly introduced to this traveler. How do we know a band of raiders does not hide in those hills?" She indicated the ominous caves that Eglon embraced with delight. Do not be troubled." The stranger lifted a golden emblem hidden beneath his collar. "Does a bandit wear such wealth?" "If I have faith in you to show you my medallion, you can trust me to cause you no harm." Was this man more of a fool than Eglon? Who wore gold without an army of servants to protect his wealth? A rich man surely had slaves to carry his load. Only 1 saddlebag and 2 small skins hung on the back of the man's donkey. "Follow me." Eglon motioned toward the crags. "I am in need of food and drink." Passing by her, the traveler bowed his head. "I'm in your debt." Her stomach fluttered as if it was contained a startled pigeon. Their visitor seemed too sure of his welcome. Her escort was eager to eat, but what of his duty to protect not only her but their mounts? Squinting toward the north, she tried to spy the lamps of Hebron. Could she make it to the town on her own? Not in the dark. A few missteps and her donkey could pull up lame. Pressure mounted behind her eyes like an afternoon squall. Why did you send me from my home, Lord? Why couldn't I stay with Leah? What welcome did an estranged uncle offer? Girl, our friend has wine, Eglon called as he trotted his donkey toward the caves. Come, fix us a meal from his provisions. Friend? What happened to Eglon's grumbling spirit? She led her donkey toward the crags and secured her mount next to the others. She made sure the animals were far enough away from the ledge and a steep drop to the flatlands. The poor beasts needed straw as much as she needed nourishment, so she gave them some of what Eglon had stored for the journey. A jut between the caves made for a nice trough. Eglon whistled. We grow faint. Why should she hurry to feed her guide? He treated her like a slave. Oh, Jerusalem, you will be a haven. I will see to our meal, but we do not want to walk to Jerusalem leading sick livestock. She made a stone fire pit and prepared a meager stew in a small pot. Her kinsman approached and placed a wineskin at her feet. Drink, you look as sour as the grapes. The scent of fermented fruit hung in the air. She shooed Eglon away. Let me work in peace, and then I will drink. She gave a nod to their guest who lounged against a large rock. After such a long ride, we cannot sup on burned food. The stranger chuckled, but his gaze lingered too long for her liking. Her flesh pimpled under her robe. Would Eglon be steadfast in his protection of her? Do not delay a sunrise. What is one swallow? Join us. Eglon would not be deterred. Grabbing the wineskin, she feigned a sip. The tangy liquid did not wet her throat. She would keep her wits under the starlight. Shh. Eglon pointed to a lizard perched atop a rock. An unclean guest comes to steal our warmth. Thief. The prominent traveler hurled a rock at the curious skink. The lizard scurried away. Eglon flung a pebble at their guest and laughed. Your aim was never any good, Nalib. And yours is better? The traveler held his palms close together. I was not far off. Ramona stilled. Eglon knew this man? So why had he acted as if the man were a passerby? Her hands shook as she stirred the stew. Think. Were they plotting a scheme? Here in the hills or in Jerusalem? The night air became a heavy drape suffocating her breath. If these men were plotting evil this eve, she needed to be near her mount so she could charge the road and race towards Hebron. She picked up the wineskin and feigned another sip. Her teeth blocked the fermented juice, but she was sure they carried a stain as if she imbibed. Positioning the food between the two men, she offered them bread to dip and backed away toward the other side of the campfire. I am tired of traveling. She stretched her teeth. I don't think you stretched teeth. She stretched her arms to the stars and yawned, displaying her violet teeth. I will rest my head on a blanket and let the breeze cool my body. Fanning her face with her hand, she pretended to stumble her way toward a cave beneath the cliffs. Her mount waited nearby, tied and slumbering with a full belly. God, watch over me this night. Slipping between the donkeys, she untethered her mount in case she needed to flee. What are you doing? The traveler asked. Sandals scuffed behind her. What are you doing? The traveler asked. Her heart rallied against her chest. For a moment, she forgot to breathe. Turning, she gave a giddy smile. I'm checking on the animals. They must be rested so we can be on our way in the morning to see my uncle. We will be on our way, Eglon slurred his affirmation. Toward Jerusalem. We will go north. Nalib stepped too close, but not to see your uncle. Heat flooded her face. A high-pitched hum wailed in her ears, drowning out his lie. Eglon promised the religious leaders he would take me to Jerusalem, to the palace. That is what Eglon promised. I did not give my word to the elders. Nalib leered like a madman. Your father owed me money, and you will be sold to pay his debt. Liar! She fisted her hands. That isn't true. I would know of such debt. I shall testify against your lie. Spittle chased her furious words. Nalib unsheathed a long, thin blade from his belt. Ramona's heartbeat boomed in her temples. She attempted to shift away from Nalib, but her sandals and feet seemed to be floating above the ground. That is why we shall cut out your tongue. Slave masters don't read Hebrew. The darkness became a dream that captured all her senses. She forced words past her lips, but her lips had become boulders, unmovable and heavy. Wait, she forced to swallow. The smoke from the campfire choked her plea. Don't you fear God? Nalib drew closer. Which one? He and Eglon blocked her path toward the main road. Donkeys on each side of her hemmed her in tight. Her only escape was down a steep hill. But how high had she climbed? She was intent on the safety of her donkey, not assessing the height she trekked. She glanced ever so briefly at the ledge. Unknown terrain waited below. What could be worse at the bottom than what she faced at the top? My uncle can pay more, and he can have the palace guards arrest us at your testimony. Eglon jerked his head in her direction. I won't speak one word. Her throat clicked with her confession. Exactly. The lust for blood in Nalib's grin sent a chill rippling over her flesh. The blade is sharp. The pain will be swift. Her stomach heaved. She needed a distraction. If only she hadn't left Leah and her village. Leah. Finding her footing, Ramona forced a gleeful smile and fluttered an arm in the direction of the campfire behind the men. Leah, you came! Eglon and Nalib turned at her screech. She pivoted, ducked under her donkey's jaw, and raced over the rocky ledge. And that, my friends, is the end of chapter 1. It's available on Kindle and in paperback. Fantastic story. We had a great interview. Be sure to check in my bio for the full interview and a chance to win a copy of Defending David, A Tay's Journey. Until next time, I'm Naomi from NaomiCraig.com, and this has been Story Time for Behind the Story.